Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here and welcome to my review of Doctor Who Season 19 Story 6, Earthshock. Easily the best story of the season and easily the best Peter Davison 5th Doctor TV story before the 5 Doctors. And also, if you can hear any noise outside, sorry I've got the windows open, it's August. So I have my windows open around April, May, maybe March to about August, September, October. Gets a bit colder after that, you know what I mean. Anyway, in the UK. So yeah, Earthshock, the best 5th Doctor story before the 5 Doctors, because the 5 Doctors is the best. And Case of Androzani is also a really good one. Might put this one above that though. We'll see when we get to that, but that'll be in 2 seasons' time. Literally 2 seasons' time. That's story 6 of season 21. So yeah, literally 2 seasons time exactly. Even though season 20 only has 6 stories, but you can argue the 5 Doctors part of that season anyway. So Earthshock. The story kind of starts out a bit. It's a bit not slow, but kind of building it up. And actually, it's actually a bit of a faster paced build-up story than most of these ones. It actually has a good pace. I do think the opening shot could have lasted a little bit longer before we cut to the people walking up, but there, that's a nitpick. Nitpick compared to other stories. And then the story pretty much builds on these characters who are actually kind of likable throughout the scenes we get with them. So it's actually good that we have a couple of scenes dedicated to them, and we're building up their characters, or some of them, and kind of getting a bit likable and getting to see what they're up to. I do think we should have seen the androids a little bit later. Maybe you could have hinted at them after the death of Snyder, and then after the death of the and then after a few other deaths, you could have then revealed it was androids. But yeah, after the death of the people going looking for Snyder and the Wind Party, you could have then revealed the androids there. But you know, it's still handled brilliantly. Yeah, the TARDIS team don't really appear for the first couple of minutes, but when they do, they've got kind of a bit of a personal conflict going on, which is actually quite fun, quite interesting. Not fun, interesting to see. Adric is a bit whiny, of course. What's new? But this time we kind of got a character building on the part of him and the Doctor. It's kind of fun. It's actually interesting to see, or not fun, interesting. I don't know why I'm saying it's fun. This bit's not fun. It's interesting. And it's also interesting to see the 5th Doctor actually showing some traits that his successor would have. The 6th Doctor kind of being a bit annoyed and grumpy and very stubborn, even though he's got the best of interests at heart. But it is interesting to see him show a few qualities of his predecessor. Adric says something, I can't remember exactly the lines, but the line actually, I think what he says about the Doctor after his regeneration, actually I think that applies more to 6 and actually also to 4 more than 5. Anyway, so the Doctor then goes out exploring in a caves on Earth. Literally, this is the 3rd story out of 5 stories in a row actually on screen that has him on Earth. Literally, the writers couldn't write a story that doesn't get set on Earth for 5 stories. 5 stories! Visitation, Black Orchid, this story, although this one does go to space at times, Time Flight, and Arc of Infinity, even though that partly does also go to Gallifrey and the Antimatter universe, but pretty much 5 stories set or partly set on Earth. I'll give Kinder credit, at least went to a different planet. Same for Snake Guards. Oh god, I can't believe I just gave those 2 stories praise. Quick, something positive about Earthshock. Well, the scenes with the Doctor, Nissa and Tegan talking about dinosaur fossils, that's interesting. And it also hints at something that's going to come up later in part 4. They're talking about something that's going to come back to them at the end of the story. That's good. I like that. And then they get found by the the soldiers. And yeah, to be honest, this is the only point in the story where I don't like Scott, the leader of the group. He's being a bit bully. I can understand his reasoning, but he's kind of going a bit too mean. But I can understand where he's coming from. We should have just asked some questions first. Eventually, the androids then turn up and try to assassinate them, and we get one of the best cliffhangers in Doctor Who history, and one of the biggest twists. This is the biggest surprise that audiences ever had. The Cybermen are back. Of course, like many well-known film twists, such as the reveal of Darth Vader being Luke Skywalker's father in Empire Strikes Back, and the twist of Psycho, yeah, it's become a pretty well-known twist, and this story is probably mostly well-known for that, as well as something else that's going to happen later on that's going to surprise viewers. But yeah, the Cybermen are back after 7 years. I think this gap was even longer than the last nearly 7-year gap since 1975 with Revenge of the Cybermen. I think that was April to May 75, and this is about March 82. Yeah, March 82. Before that, they had a 6.5-year gap between November, December 68 and April, May 75. So that was about roughly 6.5 years. This time it's more. This is closer to actually being nearly 7 years. So, yeah. Nearly another 7 years since Revenge of the Cybermen. What, they didn't want to write the Cybermen for John Pertwee or the later Tom Baker seasons? I know they want their original monsters, but what's wrong with having the Cybermen once every other couple of years? Same for the Daleks, before they got turned into a fucking parody. Thank you, Douglas Adams. One thing you did wrong. One thing. And whatever you did with the scripts of that season, minus City of Death and Sharda. But yeah, Cybermen are finally back after 7 years, and it's also the best story for 14 years, because Revenge of the Cybermen sucked. So yeah, I can guarantee they are done much better here. Even though the Cyber Leader is a bit more emotional than before, and he does have the similar traits in other 80s stories, yeah. That's why, I mean, I don't mind it, but it doesn't quite fit with the characters of the Cybermen without them starting to, knowing something is wrong with them, unlike we have in the new series, where emotions would destroy them, as seen in The Age of Steel and Closing Time. It would physically hurt them and eventually kill them. Here, it's the Cyber Leader just doesn't seem to be that worried about it. He's just he's happy. Yeah, he talks about emotions being irrelevant and not really understanding them, but he still finds stuff excellent and good and kind of enjoying himself. That being said, that is also why he's such a great character in a way. It's actually giving the Cyber Leader some personality, which is not something you'd think for Cybermen, especially after the last one. But actually, that last Cyber Leader had a bit of a personality to him as well, and he was a bit emotional. Is it just something with classic Who Cyber Leaders that they're a bit more emotional than the other Cyber Leader, the other Cybermen, and then when you get to the new series, they're just the same in a way. Well, maybe a little bit crosser in some places, but anyway, to be honest, it actually kind of makes me enjoy his scenes quite a lot, and actually making it like his character. And the same in the other 80s Cybermen stories with the Cyber Leader, which he's in every single one. Yeah, he's just so fun. Yeah, it's different Cyber Leaders. There's 2 in 5 Doctors, but he's just really fun, really enjoyable. I mean, yeah, it's going against the Cybermen's nature that they shouldn't be emotional. They shouldn't have these sort of reactions. They should be unemotional cyborgs who don't understand the meaning of such things. He shouldn't be happy. He shouldn't be going excellent. But it's so fun and so enjoyable to see it that it actually makes me enjoy Yeah, I enjoy watching the Cyber Leader, and I'm so glad he gets to appear on screen. And at least he's not putting his hands on his hips like the last one did, so I can enjoy him being happier than the last guy, so long as he doesn't do anything silly, like put his hands on his lips. I mean, okay, that's one thing that went a bit too far with the emotional Cyber Leaders. I'm okay with Cyber Leaders going, excellent, but not the hands on the hips. That's just silly. But yeah, it's double-edged sword. It's fun, but it makes no sense in the terms of the Cybermen themselves. And the Cyber Lieutenants and other Cybermen sort of have a little bit of a more emotional, but, you know, they're fun to watch. Anyway, the Cybermen have planned to blow up planet Earth with a massive bomb hidden in the caves that these guys were exploring. And one of these archaeologists and geologists were exploring, one of which is the lady who goes and finds Scott and his team to investigate after they are attacked by the androids. And the Cybermen are controlling the androids. It's actually quite nice that they have one male and one female designed android, and it's actually quite funny that the male one is destroyed first, although there are a few shots that don't line up with each other there, so that's just something for the editor and or the camera people and director to take note on. Some of them don't quite line up. Also, Scott's people are quite bad shots at the end of part 1, start of part 2, before they concentrate their fire. Itchy eye. Anyway, the Doctor and Adric are able to disrupt the Cybermen's bomb, and the Cybermen worked out who's been behind all the attacks. We get some brief glimpses of the first, second, and fourth Doctors, not the third because he never had a Cyberman story, although he does meet them in the 5 Doctors, but that's the next year. So, yeah, no one, they wouldn't show that. They wouldn't show a clip from the story that hasn't been filmed yet. So, they then decide to go to Plan B, which is to smash a freighter ship into Earth and destroy the conference. And it turns out the Cybermen are disrupting a conference that would be a couple planets getting together to fight against the Cybermen in a war they could possibly not win. So they've now armed this freighter with going to crash this freighter into Earth and blow it up. And they've stocked several Cybermen on board as well to then take over. Not sure why they didn't decide to do that first and how they got the bomb onto the Earth in the first place. But oh well, it means we can transition from Earth to the spaceship and get onto the main chunk of the story. And it's really interesting seeing the Doctor and Adric going around. Although they do get shouted at a bit for being intruders and suspected of murder to start with. It then turns out it was the Cybermen. And we get introduced to a new couple of interesting characters, but they still have a good part to play. There's Captain Briggs, there's this other lady, I can't remember her name, and there's Mr. Ringway, who turns out to be a Cyberman agent, and he is assassinated when the Cybermen see the Doctor's friends, led by Scott and Tegan, on the ship, and they think that Ringway has betrayed them with not giving them the right number of people on board. Whoops. Then the Cybermen capture Tegan and they use her as a hostage for the Doctor. And they also invade the TARDIS after Scott and his team get back. I do have to say that the scientist lady who got attacked in the caves and had reported to Scott about them, she gets stuck. She and Nyssa stay in the TARDIS for this point, which isn't too bad. But then the lady picks up a Cyberman gun after one of them is destroyed by one of Scott's people. And she tries to attack the other Cyberman coming through, and it gets her first. And she dies. She literally did nothing. After part 2, she literally did nothing. So the death isn't actually that warranted. It might have been more emotional if Scott had died, but no. Or if she died later on and she went out and helped take on the Cybermen and then... Oh, boy. Yeah, some characters just die in Classic Who. I mean, some people have an issue with Stephen Moffat's Doctor Who about how people don't die that much, and actually got happy that characters started dying in the Chibnall era, but especially important characters such as Grace O'Brien, not Grace Holloway, but who actually she died as well, and then she got brought back by the TARDIS. But yeah, people are saying Moffat's Doctor Who characters, not all of them die, quite a few of them survive. And yeah, they're right, they've got a point. But it seems that classic Who, in some stories, they just kill off characters just because. Yeah. So you've either got too many people dying, or you've got too many people not dying. It's very difficult to find a balance, and I think that's something Russell T Davies did really well. Is he was able to find a balance. Same for Chibnall at the moment, to be honest, and maybe other points in Classic Who, but certainly around this point in classics, around the Fifth Doctor's era, there would be a lot of deaths. Some of them for characters who you did get to like and enjoy, and sometimes they're just there. Yeah, but it's not a major complaint against the story. It's just something that's quite noticeable with Classic Who, and it's the complete opposite problem with Moffat Who, and also I said Classic Who, especially around this time. Anyway, Adric is made to stay on board by the Cybermen with Briggs and her associates, whilst the Doctor and Tegan goes to TARDIS. Briggs's people have gone back onto the ship, so it's just Nyssa still on board the TARDIS, and they leave the freighter. However, Adric accidentally sends the ship back in time 65 million years ago, and when he's attempting to divert away from the Cybermen's technology that would have had it on a crash course for Earth. And he can't stop the ship from crashing onto Earth now, but the Doctor, Tegan, and Nyssa realise that it was the thing that wiped out the dinosaurs, as mentioned earlier in part 1. Told you it would come around later. And yeah, they then realise Earth is actually safe. They just have to worry about Adric now. Adric, the captain, her friend, and Scott, and the last survivor of his crew, escape in an escape pod. How they're going to get back to their time zone is uncertain. I don't know if the Doctor actually takes them back. We don't see that in the next story, so I think they're stuck in 65 million years ago and in space. So unless they can time travel in that escape pod or something, I'm not sure. The last we hear of them is the end of Scott's communication to the TARDIS. And then after the Doctor kills the cyber leader with a piece of Adric's gold badge, nice touch. I mean, yeah, I'm not for the Doctor killing people, but in this case, this guy doesn't even feel any emotions, well, apart from joy whenever he goes excellent. But apart from that, so it kind of makes sense. And Nyssa kills the other Cyberman when he comes in. They have already damaged the console, though, so things aren't working very well. And it would get fixed by Arc Infinity, though. But sadly, they cannot board the ship and cannot save Adric. And the ship crashes. Although in the original story it just explodes. Though it actually does crash in new CGI visual effects that you can have the option of watching the story in. And actually, after watching the story, I actually put those on to watch that final scene with the new CGI effects to see how it looked. And yeah, that is actually, despite Adric not being the best character and a bit whiny, it was quite a shocking and emotional scene at the end, and you can actually honestly feel what the other characters are going through. And it's actually a nice touch that we have silent credits with the picture of the damaged badge on the floor as the end of the story. It's actually quite emotional. Wow. So I think it's only fitting that we wrap up this review. Okay, besides a few niggles with it, such as some of the filming and editing earlier on in the story, in some places, the scientist lady who called Scott's crew down into the caves not getting much to do later on and dying for no reason, and the cyber leader being a bit too emotional, even though it's fun to see him emotional, but it's a bit too emotional. Then Earthshock is a fantastic story. It is such a fantastic story. Perfectly written, for the most part, brilliantly shot and edited. I mean, apart from a few bits in parts, the opening shot of part 1 should have been a bit longer, in my opinion, and parts of part 2 in the fight scenes. And yeah, the bits in the case, it does, when compared to the freighter bits, it doesn't seem that necessary. But I do think that does help transition the story along from one part to the other, and it's done brilliantly. And the two twists at the end of part 1 and at the end of part 4, with the return of the Cybermen and the death of Adric. This is the first companion death since Sara Kingdom in 1966's The Daleks' Master Plan, part 12, with Katarina also passing away in part 4 of that story in 65. And to be honest, those two companions were only around for a few episodes, so there wasn't as much of a emotional connection. They were basically guest characters who got promoted to companion spots. But actually, it's Adric's who is the first major companion death or major exit that involves some sort of harm coming to them, in a way. I mean, Jamie and Zoe got their memories wiped, but they didn't really got harmed when exit. So this is actually, besides Katarina and Sara, this is the first companion exit that actually got some harm to them. Not just, we've got to go, we don't like what's going on, or we've had enough, or it's time to move on with our lives, or forced to leave in some cases. But no, this is actually the first time where there is some sort of physical or mental harm to a character, to a companion exiting the show. And we will see that going forward with later characters in 80s and the new series. And whilst I don't think there's that many others that die on screen, there are certainly the ones that come very close to it, such as Perry, who's apparently she dies, but then she apparently survives. Donna, the Dr. Donna self of her is killed, but Donna herself is still alive, but she remembers she might die. Amy and Rory are sent back in time and die in the past. And Clara, well, she does die, but then she's taken out of time for a bit, and then she gets to have a few adventures before having to go back to her death. And Bill also she is killed and turned into a Cyberman. She then becomes a water puddle and then flies across the universe. So yeah, you do get some characters who do die, or supposedly die, and also Grace and Chang, but they get resurrected by the TARDIS. So they supposedly die, but one way or another, there's a way for them to survive or come back and then come back to death later. Supposedly, but Adric is definitely on-screen character, the main on-screen companion death, in a way. And this time there is no shortcuts, unless you watch the funny part 5 shorts that's on the DVD. That's actually quite funny. The CGI is a bit off, and then it's a stop-motion adventure where Adric arrives on Earth. He's like, "Oh, I survived," and then a dinosaur just eats him right there and then, and the Cyberman head is like, excellent. That's a funny but weird short. But I don't know if I consider that canon. And it's only 2 minutes well, not even that. But the death in the story is certainly very impactful and very emotional, and really brilliant done. And I think this is also Matthew Waterhouse's best performance of the show. It's his last story, and he's putting his best performance in. Yeah, he's a bit whiny in places, but he's also a pretty good character in other places. Sadly, Nissa doesn't get a huge amount to do, but Sarah Sutton does well with what she does get. And Tegan Janet Fielding is brilliant as well. She even admits herself to be a mouth on legs, so she's probably realised that by now. But she does a good job. She's tries to go in and stop some Cybermen. Yeah, and Janet does a great job. And Peter Davison, again, I think this might be his best performance so far as well, as of the Doctor. And yeah, we will see his character grow and develop from this point, because it's starting from now that the Fifth Doctor is going to experience more and more loss in his life before we get to Kate of Androzani. And that seems to be a theme that runs through the Fifth Doctor's era. He starts losing people, and not in the nicest ways. Oh, I forgot, Comedian was killed as well. Oh, we'll get to him in a few stories' time. But yeah, and the Cybermen, as much as the Cyber Leader is a bit too emotional, he's still fun to watch, he's still a great character, and so are the Cybermen. They're back in full force. After the what the hell were you thinking with the treatment of the Cybermen in Revenge of the Cybermen, we are back in full force with these classic villains. It only took them about 14 years, or 13 and a half years, for them to do it. And yeah, this is probably the best Cyberman story of the 80s. I mean, I am a Attack of the Cybermen fan, and I'm excluding 5 Doctors from this list, because I like I would for Dave the Doctor for the Daleks, even though they are in it. But yeah, I also like Silver Nemesis, which is an unpopular opinion. Yeah, in fact, the most popular opinion is liking Earthshock, for liking an 80s Cyberman story is this one. But yeah, Earthshock, brilliant. The supporting characters are also great, and they're played brilliantly well. And although I do think that scientist lady should not have died without some sort of character growth or more involvement in the story, because it's just a death for the sake of it. And yeah, I think it's also handled well. Great, some good visual effects. Although they could have actually had the ship flying into the Earth, but maybe that was beyond their budget. And some good filming and editing, apart from early on, as I mentioned, in some places. But not too much. It's only a few bits. It's not gonna affect my enjoyment of the story. It's just something I noticed. So on the whole, I'm going to give Earthshock a 10 out of 10. First 10 out of 10 story since City of Death. And yeah, and the first 10 out of 10 story of the 5th Doctor's era. Yes! Yeah, after 3 not so good stories to start, well, 2 not so good stories and 1 absolutely diabolical story, and then 1 great story and another good one, we now have a fantastic story. You know, I think this should have actually ended season 19. I think this should have been the final story, but we got 1 more, and it only sort of plays on the afterthought session for a few minutes in parts of part 1 and parts of part 2, I think, a little. But not much. So I think this actually should have been the end of season 19. This should have been the season finale. It's such a big story, so epic. You've got a major villain returning, companion death, twist, great adventure, best story of the season. Should have been the season finale. All of it's lining up. It should have been the season finale, but no, we got Time Flight instead. That's next. That's going to be the last story. So yeah, I honestly think this story should have been last. I think it was so epic. It should have been last. Oh well, live and dream, I suppose. And also, season 20 would have to open on. You'd have a big gap between this story and season 20's opener, which would have had audiences shocked for a year, nearly, almost a year. And then season 20 would have to deal with the afterthought of that for an episode or 2. Yeah. So yeah, that's Earthshock. That is one of the best Cyberman stories of all time, and one of the best 5th Doctor stories of all time. And spoiler alert for the ranking, best story of the season, easily. Next time we'll be taking a look at the actual final story, because like I said, I think Earthshock should have been the season finale. Oh well, instead we'll take a look at the actual season finale next time, Time Flight, which I actually enjoyed on the first time I saw this story. I actually thought it was really enjoyable. I had a really good time. Even I had an injection also later that day, a flu jab, and I was tried to talk to my mum about the story, and I enjoyed it. However, time is not always kind to some stories, and rewatches have proved not to be as enjoyable as the first time round. I don't even know how many times I've rewatched it, probably just 1. So we'll see how it goes on the next rewatch. I might actually end up hating it. It hasn't got a very good reputation, it's got a very bad reputation. But maybe like the Time Monster, maybe I can find some joy in such a hated story. Or is it going to turn out to be like the Leisure Hive, where, yeah, it's not that great. I don't know if I'd hate it as much as other people, but is it not that great? Well, after I rewatch it, I'll let you know in the review. Okay, next time, Time Flight. And also I'll let you know now, whilst the reviews were on hold, one day I accidentally spilled some water over my remaining last 3 stories of season 19 and season 20 and season 21 DVDs. So some of them got wet covers, and so they will look a little bit crinkled and wrinkly. Not all of them, but some of them. This one's an example. I think the worst one affected was Snake Dance. But all of them from Black Orchid to Time Twin Dilemma may have been affected. So quite a few of them have wrinkled covers. So I'm just warning you then. The same for the Living Daylights DVD cover I had for that film's review. Although that was spilt on another day. It was an accident. Oh well, anyway, that's it from me. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. This was a bloody long review. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. Anyway, Earthshock. Now, again, fuck. And yeah. So fucking sneezes. Anyway, Adrix is made to stay on board with the side by the after the absolute what the hell were you thinking with the treatment of these characters, or is it going to turn out to be another Kinder? Actually, no, that's one that people do like. What's one that people aren't so keen? Leisure Hive, or is it going to turn out to be another Leisure? And also, let you know now that a few in between the reviews being on hold, whilst the